Hello beautiful creative friends, it's Belinda and I'm here today to share my latest Hip Kit Club design team projects using the October 2025 kits. This one is all about, you guessed it, texture, colour and trying to find some fun ways to get a little bit more out of patterned papers. And I absolutely loved how these stitched diamonds came out on the finished layout. So you've seen me start off with my white cardstock background, as I always do with my projects these days. I have cut it down smaller than I typically would for most of my layouts though. I've cut this one down, the white cardstock down to 10.5 inches square. And there was a really specific reason for that. I had laid out these diamonds across my page because I wanted to get an idea of exactly how wide they would spread, which is the reason why I have chosen a 10.5 inch white cardstock background. So I've cut the patterned paper border about 2 inches thick, but when I placed the white cardstock straight down onto that pattern paper, it just didn't really work for me. So I went and had a look through the 12 by 12 papers and selected another one, which is this really pretty blue chevron-y stripe. And I want to first of all mat my white cardstock onto, it's about 1/4 inch border onto this blue patterned paper, and then I will mat that whole lot down onto the polka dot paper. So my working space for my layout is reduced on this particular project compared to what I would usually work in, but I really do like the way that it turned out, and it still stays true to the aesthetic that I really love of having that really nice, bright, clean white background. I like to use my wet adhesive when I am adhering things down like this because it just gives me a little bit of wiggle room. I eyeball these things, and so using the wet adhesive just allows me to shift things around a little bit if I need to. Once I have placed that wet adhesive down, I'm going to take the whole lot over to my sewing machine and just add a stitched border around the inside of the white cardstock background, and I've just used a pink thread there that coordinates really nicely with some of the paler pink polka dots in that pattern paper, and just turning it around to quickly show you how I finish off the back of these pages. I like to add, this is just some painter's tape that I pick up from Bunnings, which is a hardware store in Australia, and I like to add some painter's tape across the open edge. That means that when I go to slip these into pockets in my albums, nothing's going to snag or get caught or rip or tear. So that's just my little trick for finishing off the back of each of my layouts. Before I lay my diamond pieces down, I do want to prepare my photo so that I've got a rough idea of where the photo is going to go, because some of these diamonds weren't complete. So some of them have got a corner cut off, and I'm going to have to be a little bit strategic in where I place those and make sure that they sit behind the photo. So having the photo prepared allows me to just check that as I'm working. Now, I am absolutely happy to admit that balancing colors when there are this many different colors and this many different patterns happening is not something that I'm particularly good at. So I've grabbed another sheet of this fabulously fallish patterned paper, and I'm using that as a guide. So to begin with, I am actually just copying the placement of color against color. And then once I've got them down, I know it's pretty evenly balanced, and I can just make some really minor tweaks to have it work a little bit better for the scale that I'm working in. Because on that 12 by 12 paper, it's obviously a much larger scale, so you can have similar colors closer together. I'm not using anywhere near as many spaces as is on the 12 by 12. So I have moved a few of those just a little bit. I adhered all of those down off camera. It did take me a little while to get the placement nice and straight, so I spared you the torture of watching me measure out and then adhere down each of those little diamonds, but you will see the finished piece coming back in a little bit. And I just wanted to add a little bit behind the photo, not to sort of, initially I thought it would be to help it stand out against the background colors, but really it's more to help to add sort of a dividing space between the photo and the background. So I've used a patterned paper. I've also used, this is some really beautiful pale pink vellum, just to add a little bit of softness. And then I've used my distressing tool and just roughed up the edges of that vellum a little bit. Now my title here is from the chipboard titles, which came in the embellishment kit or in the main kit. You may have seen earlier off to the top left-hand side that I had originally used some of the Lindy's Magicals to color those alphas, but once I placed them down over the top of those patterned papers, they were just getting lost. The color just did not stand out against those patterns. So I've gone and used some gold embossing powder from my stash, and I have embossed over the top of those. It was really quick, really simple. It only took one coat. And that just really helps them to stand out a little bit more, well, a whole lot more against the relative busyness of those patterned paper diamond pieces there. So I'm ready to start sticking things down. You have seen me place some double-sided tape behind the photo and then a whole lot of wet adhesive. The reason that I have the wet adhesive there is because it's going to be sitting against the stitching of those diamonds, and I used quite a thick thread there, so they are quite dimensional, and using that wet adhesive, the same as I am doing now with these chipboard titles, means that the adhesive is going to seep through the stitching pieces and it's going to help it to stick really, really well. If I was to just use some tape, it's just not going to be sturdy. So I'm coming down to embellishing here. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. This is from the cardstock kit, and I used the Fancy Edge metal die, which is from the September 2025 kits. You can see that I am still having so much trouble figuring out which way to place the die down on my paper that I'm cutting out. But I got it eventually, and that just brings in a little bit more of a pop of that bright orange color and a little bit more added texture, because if you have watched any of my videos before, you will know that texture is something that I am really, really big on. In my layouts, I try not to include a whole lot of dimension anymore because I'm really conscious about the amount of space that they take up. So I have gone all in on texture in place of dimension because it just really helps to bring in that visual interest without bulking up my layouts too much. I do want to do a little bit here in the top left-hand corner of this photo. I wasn't exactly sure what color I wanted. Initially, I thought having some of that darker blue would work, but it was just too much. So in the end, I've gone with the yellow, and to cut these out, I have a little paper punch there that cuts a little, what do you call it, a little flag piece. And I just used some of the off-cut diamonds from when I was cutting and stitching all of the diamonds for my background. So the yellow I think works quite well there. It's contrasted well against the photo, but it's not too bold to detract from the photo or anything else that's going on in the layout. I've added some wet adhesive behind that, and then I want to add just a couple of little extra layering pieces on top of it. So to start off with, I'm using this puffy sticker which says "So happy here," and we really were. This is a photo from autumn a few years ago where I live, just down the road, literally down the end of the road from my house. There is a little hobby farm place that on the weekends runs a little market stall, and they do these beautiful homemade breads. They've got loads of fresh produce, and autumn is a really good time here for grapes. Believe it or not, it's the end of the grape growing season, and where I live, I am in right next to a grape growing region, and they are just so beautifully sweet and juicy as we enter autumn. So we've loved going for a little walk or a ride down to that farm on the weekends to pick up some grapes and other fresh fruit and fresh produce, and to grab some of the delicious baked goods that they have on offer there. I am keeping the design really, really simple for this layout because I don't want anything to overshadow the work that I have done to stitch those diamonds, but I also want to keep it interesting and fun. So to bring in that interesting and fun, I thought I would create a little bit of a hang tag element. This is something that I've done a few times with a few different layouts, but honestly, I haven't done it for a while. And when I saw that autumn tag, it really inspired me to do it again. So I've just picked a couple of die cut pieces. I've got one of those pumpkins. I have a little blue leaf, and then I'm going to layer the three of them up, hang them onto some twine. And I did fuss around a little bit here on camera trying to get the placement right, and I end up having to go and repunch some of the holes there. But my intention was to have the three pieces stacked on top of each other, threaded onto some twine, and then to somehow have that wrapped around the title. I have already adhered the title down with my wet adhesive, so it is stuck down pretty well. And I did try, you'll see me try on camera to see if I can get that through. But what I had to do in the end was switch the camera off, thread that twine onto a needle, and then use the needle to sort of stitch it in behind the H. And so in just a moment after I've finished fussing around here, I am going to switch the camera off, and then you will see me come back with the finished piece. So I've hooked it around the H a few times, tied it off with a bow, and then I am just letting it hang nicely there to fill in a little bit of that white space. And then really simply finishing off the layout with some of the foam embellishment foliage pieces. If you would like to try out the Hip Kit Club kits for yourself, you can use my discount code Belinda10 to get a discount on your first order. You will find a link down in the description box of this video. That does give you a little saving, and it really does help to support my channel. As a subscriber, you would get discounts on additional kits, bundled or bi-monthly shipping options, monthly project sheets, and access to all of the Hip Kit Club's free cut files. But you don't have to subscribe. You can just make one-off purchases if that suits you more. If you have enjoyed this video, I would love for you to like it or leave a comment. It really does mean a lot to me. And if you're not already subscribed, I would be absolutely thrilled to have you join me for more creative projects. I will leave it there for now and say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.